from a very early age, my dad instilled in me the importance of education. He barely finished elementary school, because he was very poor too, growing up in the country. But it's all I can remember. You have to go to school. You have to go to school. You have to become something good. That's all I heard from ever since I could understand language, and that was what drove me to get an education, to walk to school if there was no money for bus fare or money for lunch. I would go anyway. It was just a passion, and I develop a passion for whatever I do. If I don't like what I'm doing, I don't do it. And so, how did I get to New York? So I'm in drama, and then at around age 9, I started playing the violin as well.
Okay.
One day I was in class, and someone came and said, "There's a music teacher in the music room. She's teaching violin. Anybody who wants to volunteer to go learn to play the violin, raise your hand." And of course, my hand was the first to go up.
You had both sides of your brain. You had the math and the science and the smarts, but you also had the artistic side. That not many people have that. Both sides, the creative side and also the more linear side.
I think that's what saved me.
Okay.
It's that right brain that actually. That's why I love creative people and flock towards you, because it was the music that kept me focused and centered when there was chaos around.
Okay.
And so I'm a classically trained violinist.
Yeah.
Eventually, I decided, I think I'd make a bigger contribution to society as a lawyer.
And at what age were you when you said that?
Oh, I was like 23 after my first degree. I did a degree in biochemistry, and I was at a crossroads at that point, and I didn't know what I was going to do with this degree. I didn't get into medicine, but I kept on doing the arts, and I was a debater as well. And but I loved politics, and I loved debating. I loved solving problems, and I loved helping people. And I thought, lawyers make policy, and policy help people. And at that point, I said, okay, I think I should become a lawyer. Throughout that time, it didn't occur to me that I could be an entertainment lawyer. I wanted to become a trade lawyer, international trade, because I didn't know any entertainment attorneys.
How did you feel like that you would serve that artistic side of yourself when you made the decision that you were going to go into law and go into policy? Did you feel as though you were sacrificing that artistic side of yourself that you had fed for so long? How did you reconcile that?
I didn't think of it that way because, when I was doing the sciences, I was doing the arts, and to me, it just felt normal. I mean, my classmates used to tease me and call me mad to the second power, because but it was fun. But to me, it just was natural.
Okay.
Like a lot of people are like, well, how do you switch from sciences to law, or how do you do science and music? And I'm like, well, how do you not do it?
Right.
And so I love science fiction films because obviously there's a lot of I love artificial intelligence, and I love things about space and physics and mathematics. So to me, the science and the arts is just like the same. They're just one thing. So until you asked me this question, I never thought about there is a difference, even though people always said, well, how do you do that? And I'm like, well, I don't know, it just happened. And it works for me because I understand storytelling, no matter what canvas you put it on. My first job I landed in Jamaica was with a small firm. They were practicing entertainment law and commercial law. That was the first time I heard about entertainment law as a discipline, as separate, because in law school, never heard of that. You know, we always talk about trade and contracts and you know, jurisprudence and criminal law and tort, but
How about
never.
personal injury? You guys have?
Yeah, of course, tort. You know, yes, personal injury. Yeah, but here in the U.S. they actually teach entertainment law. In England and in Jamaica and the Commonwealth, entertainment law isn't a subject, it's just a body of law. And it's called entertainment law because you represent people in entertainment.
And so you fell in love with it at that point, and you were like, this is like, okay, now it's starting to make sense. It's all coming full circle.
Well, it made sense because at that time, I started my own company. I was doing audiovisual production,
Okay.
right, and making radio commercials.
While you had your first job at the law firm?
Yes,
Wow.
right, and I was interested. I've always been a lover of film and TV. You know, growing. My stepdad's brother worked at Carib, which is a movie theater near my house,
Okay.
and my neighbor's mom worked at a concession stand. So every weekend I would go and get triple bill free, right? And so I grew up on the James Bond films. You know, I grew up on martial arts and love martial arts films with a passion. I mean, I don't even think Quentin Tarantino can beat me at it. And so I've always loved the medium of storytelling through film, always, from ever since I could remember. And so when I learned of entertainment law and dealing with contracts to do with actors and producers, I'm like, wait a minute, but that just makes perfect sense. That's what I should be doing because that's what I've been doing all along and dealing with those contracts even before, you know, I thought that this discipline called entertainment law, I was dealing with agreements, dealing with entertainers. In Jamaica, it's mainly music, entertainment, not a lot of film and television work for lawyers. And so I came here because of that to New York. It was either going to be New York City or LA, but I came here because I have family here and it was easier for me to make that transition. But the law is constantly evolving and I have to be learning every day. I do understand story, I do understand character development, I do understand plot development, but I also understand commercial viability. How is this going to sell? And I'm always thinking about the art and how do we sell this? What's the commercial value of this now and in the future? Usually I can tell from the pitch that this is garbage or it sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when a potential client comes to you and they're asking you to come on board and represent them, is that what you're saying? Then at that point you're evaluating, you know.
Yes, because you know I'm going to say to a client, well, why do you need a lawyer? I need to assess the client to see how I'm going to be of benefit to the client, to the potential client. So I need to know. What are you working on? What's your story? What do you plan to do with it? Who is your target audience? And if you're a producer, if you're just a writer, that's fine. And you're planning to pass this on to somebody else to produce, and they're going to think about the business aspect of it, then that's a different thing. But if you are planning to produce this, then I need to know that you understand what you're up against. And so I ask you tough questions, and then you decide, well, do you want someone to advise you and to guide you the right way, or do you want to walk away, think about it, and then come back? And Joe asked the question, you know, at what point do you approach an entertainment lawyer? And I usually say to people, the moment you get an idea, right? Just an idea. You haven't written the script yet. You don't even have an outline or a treatment, nothing, just an idea. Once you get an idea, that's when you need to consult counsel. Ideas aren't copyrightable. You can't copyright an idea, but you can protect it from other people stealing it, using it. You can protect it through contract. You can protect it in many different ways other than actually registering it as a copyright. The second thing is, well, instead of taking an idea and going by trial and error, why not straight out of the box get some ideas as to the best way to approach this idea, so that when you start painting, you can avoid a lot of the mistakes and the pitfalls along the way.
And when you say the best way to approach this idea, you mean in terms of the commercial viability, or do you mean in terms of the ease of production, and what do you mean by that?
Well, more in terms of, because commercial viability and ease of production, those come later once you have a finished product. But in terms of narrowing down your focus, like what is your overall plan, right? Do you want to make a faith-based movie? Do you want an art house drama? Is it a horror you're doing? Are you making a horror film and the budget is going to be 30 million, right? If you have these ideas, I can help you, because I can say, well, you're not going to make a horror movie for 30 million, and don't write a horror film for 30 million, that sort of thing. So those are some of the guidance you can get from an entertainment attorney. And this has nothing to do with contracts, other than, you have a submission agreement or an NDA if you're submitting your treatment or your idea to someone for them to review. I mean, even readers and who you may submit your script to, you might want an NDA from them. As
an independent, artist who is trying to gather support and gather resources to get their project made, a lot of times they feel as though asking somebody to sign an NDA before they'll even take a look at their project is a hindrance to, moving it further along the chain of actually bringing it to life, because a lot of times if somebody sends me something and they ask me to sign an NDA, I probably won't do it. I won't even get to it. I won't look at it, so what do you say in that, to that type of mentality?
Well, yeah, so,
or to that type of fear.
Right. And it's a reasonable fear, because it does happen, but there are ways around that. I mean, first of all, everything has to be taken within context and will have to be approached on a case-by-case basis. So, if you, let's say you are submitting your script to a potential investor, for example, is it someone you know? Is it someone arbitrary? If they don't want to sign an NDA, well, what is the risk, right? Now, if you have a finished script, there's really no need for someone to sign an NDA, because you would register your script, right? So that's pretty clear cut. If it's just an idea that you're pitching, then you would want to get an NDA. And if they don't want to have an NDA, then you have to decide, is this someone I trust, or
is it worth the risk?
Is it worth the risk, or what? How do I prove that I made this submission to this person, right? So did I send an email or registered mail? What kind of paper trail can I keep, so that down the line, when I see this big opening at the MC and it's my idea on screen, right? Then you'll be able to prove that they had access. That they had access to my work, because I submitted to them and I can prove it.
In terms of a producer comes and they already have the script, they already have the money, at that point, what are some of the reasons why they would bring on a production attorney to help them with their production?
Well, I mean, if they have a script and the money, then gosh, they're lucky. But that's good. And I smile because I'd love them to come to me then, because that's every entertainment attorney's dream, for a client to walk through the door who already has money and a good script, because then that's the end of the story. Production is a big thing, and it can take a long time because it involves a lot of people, and the logistics can be crazy. So, you have the budget and you have the script. Now it's time to get the other key players on board. So, you need your cast, you need your producer, you need a director, you need your crew heads, you need to think about location, you need to think about maybe tax credits if you need it. You need to think about what am I going to do about post-production, but most importantly, because obviously you're making a film for people to see, and not something that you will just sit at home with your popcorn and watch. So you have to think about, well, who's going to watch this and how am I going to distribute it? And that's the most important question. Because how you shoot the film, who you put in it, who you cast, how you package it is going to determine how it will be distributed and where.
And so what advice do you usually give clients in that regard, in terms of thinking through those steps and the distribution plan and how to attract the distributor and what the plan is to make their investors' money back?
They need to have a business plan. Think about the big picture for this project, and think about your project as a business from the ground up. It's a startup. Each project is a startup. So think of it that way. Create a mission statement, create your goals, create a business plan with a marketing strategy and a distribution strategy, and look at how each of those different points relate to each other and how they help to enhance each other along the chain, right? So that eventually you will get to distribution and get into distribution in the right market, right? Because you could get distribution, but it's in the wrong market and nobody will see it because this type of film is just not for that market. And so you really need to think it through from start to finish, from who is going to be the DP, who is going to direct it, who will be in it. Is this for an international audience? Is it just for domestic? Is it a story for mainstream or is it a niche market? How will we get the film to our niche market? You need to think that through before you start shooting.
What are some of the different funding strategies that you're seeing now that productions are using to actually fund their films?
So your finance strategy is going to depend on a lot of things. Main one is your budget, right? If you have the bigger budgets, you're going to have a different strategy from smaller budgets. So if your budget is, $500,000, your finance strategy is going to be way different from if your budget is $3 million, and it's going to be different from if your budget is $25 million, right?
So, for example, let's say under $500,000.
So let's say your budget is $250,000. Okay. So your finance, forget about tax credits, right? At that budget. Forget about production loan at that budget. You're probably going to think of private equity at that budget.
And how about equity crowdfunding?
Right,
well?
or crowdfunding. And the crowdfunding is not as easy as it sounds.
No.
In order to do that, you're going to need to have a following, right? So you may want to attach someone who is famous and popular to your project because they have a following, or you have a lot of friends, and if you already have a lot of friends, you really don't even need to do crowdfunding. You just call them and say, hey, invest in my project, right? So crowdfunding is requires a certain strategy that usually begins with you either having a subject matter that appeals to a certain group of people, or you have someone on your project who has a following. You know, they have 10 million followers on Twitter, or you create an amazing trailer that has 50 million views, right? Then you can tap into those people to give you $100,000 or $1. But if you know nobody, you have no friends, and you put
That sounds so sad.
oh yeah, and you put
don't know
and you
nobody, you don't have no
and you
friends.
create a Kickstarter campaign, you're not going to get any money.
Of course not.
One last thing about crowdfunding is that you can still win even if you don't reach your goal, right? Because the nature of film is it's about spreading it like wildfire. So if you have 10,000 people donating to your campaign, that's 10,000 fans, 10,000 potential buyers. That's marketing. So even if you didn't reach your goal and you didn't get the money, well, that's 10,000 people. Investors look at that. Investors will look to see, well, how many people supported that campaign,
Right.
because investors thinking about the return on investment. Well, if you have 10,000 people who support your campaign, then those same 10,000 people are going to become your ambassador, right? They're going to spread the word. So if I'm going to invest in this film, I will give you the budget, right? Even though you didn't reach your target on Kickstarter, I'm going to give you the budget. But you're going to keep in touch with those 10,000 people, follow up with them. They're going to help you to spread the word about your
So
film.
it sounds like what you're saying is that if you're looking to attract investors, you might want to do a crowdfunding campaign first to see how many people are interested and to prove that there's interest there, and then take your project to investors.
Cautiously, right? Because if it fails, I mean, what if? Because the opposite could work, right? I mean, the opposite is also true. You put your project on Indiegogo or Kickstarter, and 10 people donate. That's not good, right? The investor is going to be like, well, nobody likes your project. Why should I, right? So that's why strategy is very important. You need to have a strategy. You need to know how this is going to work, and you need to have some kind of forecast or a way to predict how it's going to work out.
When in terms of like actually even tapping into investors, there was the strategy of dialing for dollars. Do you still see that as a way that folks are actually reaching investors, just picking up the phone and just dialing as many numbers as possible and sending out as many query letters or quote unquote query letters as possible?
I mean, people still do it. It's very time consuming, and it's a hit or miss. And you will need to have resources to do that. If you're calling 20,000 people, you probably need a room full of people to do that. For a month. Always start with the people you know, because the people who know you are the ones who are more likely to invest in you for you, and not just the project, because they don't really care about getting a return on investment. They're doing it because of you, right?
For someone who's considering equity crowdfunding, what are some of the legal ramifications that they need to be aware of if they're considering that strategy? So,
do your due diligence on on whichever platform you're using. Hire an entertainment attorney or a securities attorney, because there are a lot of disclosures that you are required by law to provide. Most platforms, for a fee, they will provide you with these disclosures for a fee. and I can tell you a lot of these platforms charge just the same or even more than a lawyer would charge for you to be on their platform and to provide you with all that paperwork. But when you're doing equity crowdfunding, you have to consider, make sure that you comply with state and federal securities laws. And
So each state is different, in other words.
yes.
So how does that work, though? For example, if I have my project and I'm doing equity crowdfunding on Indiegogo, and somebody lives in California versus somebody lives in New York, and how does that work?
Well, in that case, federal securities laws
Okay.
would be the the important law to follow in that case, which allows for interstate commerce, right? So California and most states already have provisions for equity crowdfunding. And so if you comply with New York, you probably already comply with California. And usually on the website and in the offering, it would state the requirement for each state, right? And so if someone, in Ohio decides to invest, there shouldn't be a problem, right? As long as there's a proper disclosure for that particular state. That's what the equity crowdfunding really is all about. Now you can solicit to the general public. Before, that was prohibited, right? You couldn't advertise and solicit to the general public unless it was registered a registered security. You would have to register with the SEC, which is very expensive to do. With the equity crowdfunding laws, since the Jobs Act, that has changed. There are still some limitations, and in terms of the amount of money you can raise per year.
So in terms of advertising on that, what do they need? Do they need?
Like taking out a radio ad or newspaper, or even advertising on your Facebook page, right? Yeah. So Section 181 Section 181 of the Federal Tax Code, which allows allows you to get a tax deduction on certain production expenses, if those expenses are made within the year that the tax code is applicable. It hasn't been renewed; it has expired, right? But this happens every year, and then they renew it and make it retroactive, right? So I'm assuming it's going to be renewed again and then be made retroactive. But to be grandfathered in means if you don't have to complete all of your production in 1 year, or in the year that the law is applicable, right? As long as you started. So Section 181 was valid in 2016. If you started production in 2016 and you didn't finish, you would still be eligible to deduct all of the expenses, even if they finish in 2017 or 2018 or 2020, right? Now, if you're going to start production in...
Somebody gave you money, they can deduct that for like 10 years up to the point.
Yes.
Even if you didn't make any money, even if you failed to make a damn movie, they can still claim it.
Yeah, there's no requirement for you to complete the film or to be successful, unlike, say, state tax credit, which require you to actually complete the film. With the Section 181 is any expenses, right? And so it's much broader than state tax credit, like the New York State.
Now, is there any, business entity that you would recommend, like a LLC versus a S corp versus a regular corp, for film production?
It depends on on the particular case, right? But in most cases, an LLC, I would say, right? Because in most cases, as independent filmmakers, it's just you and maybe one other partner. You don't really want us to set up a corporation because one, corporations require a lot more formalities than LLCs, even though they're cheaper to form, right? They're more expensive to operate, and you end up with a greater tax liability with a corporation than an LLC. So, if it's 2 or 3 people, an LLC is the way to go. You can still raise venture capital with an LLC nowadays, right? Traditionally, back in the day, venture capitalists would only invest in corporations for various reasons, right? But that has changed because they have different kind of structures that they can use in order to protect some of the venture capitalists who may be 501c3 corporations. And that was one of the reasons why you had to be a corporation in order to get venture capital funds, but that's not a requirement anymore.
Okay.
But at this stage, you're not even thinking about that because venture capital venture capital fund is not going to invest, in a $500,000 film. Right, that's one of the things that an entertainment lawyer will tell you when you're just starting out with your idea for a $500,000 film, and you have part of your finance plan is to raise venture capital funds.
Okay.
It's not going to happen.
Can you talk a little bit about the pre-sale agreements?
So pre-sale means pre-sale really is a distribution agreement, but it means that someone is agreeing to buy your film before you make it. So it's why pre-sale. And if you're lucky, you could get an advance, meaning you'd get some money up front, which you can then go use to make the film or part of it. But in most cases, you don't get any money up front. You just get a piece of paper. Oh? You get it's a contract, right? But it's a piece of paper, and then you can take that piece of paper and go, to a lender for a production loan, using the piece of paper as collateral if your distributor is someone the lender trusts, right?
So what if those pre-sale agreements are maybe foreign, from
Right.
And so is there some type of, when you talk about somebody that they trust and the fact that it's a foreign company, how does that kind of work together?
Right. So a lot of foreign distributors have a reputation, a good reputation. They have distributed lots of films before. They have probably done business with your financial institution or your production loan lender before.
So this is not like I'm going into my Bank of America branch, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, you will take your pre-sale agreement to your Bank of America branch, but if you have a pre-sale agreement from some obscure online distribution company that nobody knows about, who are these people? Then when you take your piece of paper to your branch, your business manager, he's going to laugh at you because you're not because that's not good enough collateral for them to give you a loan. The other thing you have to understand too when you're putting together your finance plan and using pre-sale as part of your finance plan is that if, let's say, your budget is $3 million, you're not going to get, your pre-sale amount is going to be about 80% of that because the distributor is not going to is not going to purchase your film for 100% of what you say is the budget. They're going to give you about 80%. And then the bank is only going to give you about 80% of that, right? Because they're also lending you the interest.
But then you
right?
could also just make the film for less.
After you get the pre-sale.
Yeah.
You could. You could.
Is this a moment where we should turn off the camera?
No. Keep the camera running. I'm just
in the manner that you're talking about.
no. I'm just thinking about your question. Yes.
Yeah, when she said that you can make it cheaper, but doesn't that sound like you're getting slick with what you're asking for and what you're utilizing?
Well, I mean, not necessarily, because it depends on your distribution agreement. You know, it's hard to answer that without knowing what the distribution agreement says. Usually, distribution agreements require you to use a certain actor, maybe to finish on a certain budget. I mean, I don't know what the details would be in your particular agreement, but if you make it for less and you're not breaching your agreement, then you're fine. If you're making it for less and you're in breach of your contract, then that's not fine. A lot of times filmmakers will refuse financing because of the conditions that are attached. You know, if this is something you want to make yourself, you don't want to give it up, you don't want some other Joe coming to direct your movie, and if the financier says, well, you know, I want Jason Blum to direct, and you're like, well, no, he doesn't really understand, he's going to mess it up, then you can say, well, no, I'm not going to take your money. But if someone's giving you money, then, you know, they will have strings attached to it, and you're going to then have to decide whether or not it's worth making those concessions in order to get the film made or not.
The rumor was that the entertainment lawyer wouldn't touch a circumstance like this. You know, with us coming to you saying, hey, I got a movie. You got a contract? Is there money involved at the end of that?
So, think of an entertainment lawyer. You're going to an entertainment lawyer the way you'd go to a producer for, you know, to help you to set up your project. You go to an entertainment lawyer for advice and counsel and guidance. You should be prepared to pay for their expertise.
What about these non-authorized biographies? How does that work in?
Well, it depends on the source of the information. If the information, you know, is in the news or in the public domain or something that you can research, and it's not somebody else's original work, you don't really need permission to write someone's biography. If it's a public figure and information that you can find about them in the media, I mean, you can use it.
And what happens if you also embellish for entertainment purposes? Then can you be sued for, you know, like, oh, this person's lying, that never happened?
Well, the more you embellish it, is the less likely you can be sued successfully.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Even if it's, you know, this is
Because-
the story of X
because
person.
this, right, yeah, because this First Amendment expression, that's now transformative work of original expression. So the more creative your writing is, the more protectable it is.
Even if it's based off of a real person.
Even if it's based off of a real person. Copyright does not apply to anything that's not in tangible form. So if someone speaks, that's not copyrightable. So you can record it and go with it. If they write it down or if they recorded it, that's when you can't use it without their permission. Generally, you'd get an option, but more specifically, what kind of book? Is it creative writing or is it factual, right? So because if it was factual, if it was based on historical facts, then you may not need permission to adapt it, right? But if it was a piece of creative writing, then you would need an option because now you're making a derivative work from the original copyrighted work. So you would speak with an attorney or you yourself would get in touch with the author and have a written agreement giving you consent to use the book for the purpose of adaptation for a screenplay. You know, if it's a $200,000 faith-based drama, you can easily distribute this online, either through your own website or through Amazon or YouTube Red or Netflix. But technology has made it much easier, right? It's still not easy, but it's easier to find distribution for your work, as long as you know who your target market is. It's very important to know who your target market is, and you can find them. And so a lot of films don't get theatrical release, or they will have a limited release, because the purpose of theatrical release is to help to build a buzz, because you're not going to make any money from theatrical release. You're actually going to lose money, but it helps to build a buzz around your film. It allows you to get reviews, and hopefully good reviews, to get into social media, to get people talking about it, so that when you hit the VOD section window, people are looking forward to it. They will rent it, stream it, buy it. Theatrical release is usually for the projects that have the budget, because you need to have a campaign, you need to have your print and advertising budget, which is usually almost 2 times the amount of your production budget. Yes. If you plan to use Netflix as a distribution platform, you should think of Netflix as maybe your 3rd or 4th window, right?
Now, when you say window,
films are usually distributed in windows, right? So if you're doing theatrical release, with the traditional distribution method is theatrical release first.
that's the first window.
The first window, and there is usually a period of 4 to 6 months when, based on your distribution agreement, you're not allowed to, unless you're doing a day and date release, you're not allowed to have your program on any other platform while it's in the theaters. And then, so at the end of that window, then you will go to video on demand, which is usually download to rent or download to own, before you go to the subscription video on demand. Right?
What's that
Now-
old Blockbuster and all those old stores? That's what used to be.
Right.
That window's been getting smaller.
Right. Yeah, the windows are getting smaller and smaller. Yes. 2 weeks. 2 weeks now. Yes.
And maybe,
Yes.
I don't know, 60 days later,
Right.
it's available
Right.
on some type of paid platform.
Right. And you have day and date release, where it's released digitally as well as in theaters on the same day. If you make a film for $1 million, that's not determinative or the determining factor in whether or not you will get theatrical release.
Okay.
It's whether or not you are able to find a distributor who is willing to front the P&A, or you find an investor who is willing to invest the P&A, the print and advertising costs.
Okay.
Right.
And this is through film festival, the festival circuit?
Yeah, I mean, once people start seeing a film and they realize that it's really good, then an investor will come and say, well, I will invest the print and advertising, or a distributor will purchase the film, and part of the distribution agreement is that the distributor will pay for print and advertising. Now, once the distributor pays for print and advertising, they have to recoup that before you see any return, and they also take a higher distribution fee than if you're paying for print and advertising.
And then they'll usually also, they'll determine, okay, what the next window is gonna be after that, because they won't just buy it for theaters, they'll buy it for, all territories, all mediums, et cetera.
Right. And this
Right.
is where, sorry. This is where the nightmare of never seeing money from.
But you
the
do get money up
distributor
front. You get
comes
money
into
up front, and then, it's supposed to be you get some money back, but you don't, sometimes.
Well, that's one of the things you should understand about this theatrical release, is that a film you may make a film for $1 million or 1.5 and make $100 million, like Get Out. I just watched it, right? But that doesn't mean the investors are getting any of that $100 million. The investors probably start getting money once it gets to VOD, but not theatrical because the studio has to recoup its P&A. The exhibitor, the theaters take 50% off the top.
You'd be lucky to
Right.
have anything left.
So most theatrical releases lose money, and then you make it back once you go to VOD.
If you want to do an adaptation of a general Disney theme, like let's say Cinderella or Snow
Don't do
White,
it, but I'm just kidding.
but-
Or if it's Cinderella, it's fine, yes.
Okay, Cinderella, that's all I need to know.
Yeah.
Why do you say
Wait
Cinderella's
a minute,
fine?
what was?
Well, it
I didn't get a
depends.
question.
I mean, as long as you're not using the characters that are owned by Disney, but if it's the story of Cinderella, that's public domain. Yes, yeah.
Just
But if you're
because-
using the characters, then you might not be able to.
Just
Yes.
because it's so old, or
The story of Cinderella, yeah, it's very old, but the characters, some of the characters are trademarked and copyright.
so don't call her like Tinderella.
So you couldn't call Cinderella Cinderella. You would have to call her something else.
No, call her one of the.
Yeah, call her something
one of the
else, but
sisters.
even though the story is the same, yeah.
Yeah, call her one of the
But
sisters.
could the story be like almost all the same? Almost exactly the same, like, but
Of
in
course,
different,
like,
in a
think-
different kind of like.
Like
Be a different point of view.
that Shakespeare film story, Midsummer Night's Dream. How many adaptations of Midsummer Night's Dream have you seen on screen?
Wouldn't Cinderella be part of public domain because it's so damn old?
That's what he said.
The story, the story.
She should be able to name it that, shouldn't she?
No, not the
that's gotta
name.
be
That not the name of the character or but the story. The story is in the public domain, but
She changed it to Sisterella. That's good.
But can Cinderella be in the title? Like if I wanted to call her.
no,
Cinderella.
no, that's a trademark infringement.
Ebony
Yes.
Cinderella.
Boy,
Looking for a way around.
yeah, you can tell, you
Yeah.
sidestep.
So you see how useful, how important it is to have an entertainment lawyer even at this early stage.
Yeah.
Because you would have invested so many years writing a script about Cinderella, and then you have to do script clearance and realize you have to change all of that stuff. Yes.